Welcome to today's episode of the Southwest Desert, where we'll be exploring the remarkable life and legacy of Father Eusebio Francisco Kino, a Jesuit missionary who played a pivotal role in the history of the American Southwest. Our story begins on May 3, 1700, at San Cayetano del Tumacacore, where Father Kino receives an urgent message. This single day would come to exemplify the courage, compassion, and tireless dedication that defined Kino's mission in the New World. As dawn breaks over the desert landscape, a Native American rider arrives at Tumacacore with a letter from Father Agustin de Campos at San Ignacio del Caborca. The message is clear. Father Kino must hurry if he hopes to save the life of a Native American condemned to be beaten to death by Spanish soldiers, simply for the crime of running away. This moment captures the constant tension Father Kino navigated between his spiritual mission and the harsh realities of colonial expansion. While the Spanish soldiers saw their role as keeping the native population submissive, Kino viewed the indigenous people as fellow human beings worthy of dignity, education, and salvation. Let's take a step back to understand how Father Kino found himself in this pivotal position. Born in 1645 in the Italian town of Segno, Eusebio Kino joined the Society of Jesus, also known as the Jesuits, in 1665 after recovering from a life-threatening illness. During his convalescence, he had made a vow that if he survived, he would dedicate his life to missionary work. True to his word, the young Kino repeatedly petitioned his superiors to be sent on a difficult mission to minister to indigenous people in far-off lands. His persistence paid off, and in 1681, at the age of 36, Kino arrived in Veracruz, Mexico, ready to begin his life's work in the New World. Thank you for joining your desert frontiersman, Alan. Please leave a like or comment. For further desert adventures, hit the subscribe button. For the next 2 decades, Father Kino would traverse vast stretches of what is now northern Mexico and the American Southwest, particularly the region known as Pimeria Alta, the land of the Upper Pima Native Americans. His mission was not just to spread Christianity, but to improve the lives of the native people he encountered. Kino was more than just a priest. He was an explorer, a cartographer, a rancher, and a diplomat. He was the first to prove that California was a peninsula rather than an island, a geographical fact that had long been debated. But his true passion always remained his work among the indigenous people of the region. Father Kino's approach went far beyond simple religious conversion. He sought to transform the entire way of life for the people he encountered. He introduced European livestock, cattle, sheep, and goats, to the region, effectively establishing the first ranches in what would become Arizona. He taught the Native Americans how to be cowboys, farmers, and craftsmen. This practical approach to mission work was revolutionary for its time. Kino believed that by teaching the Native Americans to engage in peaceful, productive pursuits, he could steer them away from warfare and towards a stable Christian way of life. The dozen or so great ranches he established became centers of both spiritual and economic activity, laying the groundwork for future missionaries to continue his work. Now, let's return to that fateful day in May 1700. Despite the urgency of the situation, Father Kino begins his day as he always does, by celebrating Mass. After Mass, Kino mounts his horse and sets off on a grueling journey. He must cover 70 miles of rugged terrain in less than 24 hours if he hopes to reach San Ignacio in time to save the condemned man. The path takes him through what is now Nogales and San Simon, before reaching Imuris just before midnight. It's worth noting that at this point, Father Kino was no longer a young man. At 55 years old, such a demanding ride would have been a significant physical challenge, yet his writings betray no hint of complaint or hesitation. For Kino, this was simply part of his calling, another opportunity to serve the people he had dedicated his life to protecting. In the early hours of May 4th, Father Kino arrives at San Ignacio, where he immediately says Mass before turning his attention to the urgent matter at hand. Together with Father Campos, he goes to plead with the military authorities for the life of the condemned Native American. This interaction showcases another of Kino's remarkable skills: his ability to navigate the complex political landscape of colonial New Spain. Though he often found himself at odds with the military authorities, Kino knew how to speak their language and appeal to their sensibilities. In his plea for the Native American's life, Kino employs a mix of moral and practical arguments. He points out that beating a man to death for running away is not only cruel but counterproductive. Such brutality, he argues, would only breed resentment among the native population, ultimately undermining Spain's authority in the region. Justice tempered with mercy, Kino contends, would prove far more effective in maintaining order. Kino's eloquence and reasoning prevail. The military authorities agree to release the Native American, a victory not just for one man's life, but for the broader principle of humane treatment that Kino championed throughout his career. This incident was not an isolated event in Kino's ministry. Throughout his time in the New World, he frequently found himself interceding on behalf of the indigenous people against the harsh treatment of Spanish authorities. His compassion and sense of justice earned him the trust and respect of many native communities, allowing him to make inroads where other missionaries had failed. One particularly poignant example of this occurred in 1695, when Father Francisco Xavier Saita was killed by a band of Pima Native Americans. The Spanish response was swift and brutal, resulting in the deaths of over 50 Native Americans, most of whom, according to Kino, were innocent of any involvement in Saita's death. This indiscriminate retaliation threatened to undo years of Kino's patient work among the Pima. Yet even in this dire situation, Kino's diplomatic skills and commitment to justice shone through. He worked tirelessly to ensure that only those directly responsible for Saita's death were punished, and even then, he advocated for mercy. In a remarkable turn of events, the Native Americans who had participated in Saita's murder were ultimately pardoned after being prepared for death and given the last rites of the Church. This blend of justice and mercy, so characteristic of Kino's approach, helped to repair relations between the Spanish and the Pima, allowing his missionary work to continue. As we reflect on Father Kino's life and work, it's important to understand the broader historical context in which he operated. The late 17th and early 18th centuries were a time of significant expansion and conflict in the Americas. European powers were vying for control of vast territories, often with little regard for the indigenous populations who had called these lands home for millennia. In this tumultuous environment, figures like Father Kino played a complex and sometimes contradictory role. On one hand, they were agents of European colonization, bringing with them a religion and way of life that was foreign to the native inhabitants. On the other hand, many missionaries like Kino genuinely cared for the welfare of the indigenous people and often served as their advocates against the worst excesses of colonial rule. Kino's legacy in the Southwest is profound and enduring. The missions he established became the seeds from which many modern communities grew. His introduction of European livestock and farming techniques transformed the economy of the region. Even today, centuries later, the remains of some of the churches he built still stand as testament to his influence. Perhaps most importantly, Kino's detailed writings and maps provided invaluable information about a part of North America that was largely unknown to Europeans at the time. His observations on the geography, climate, and native peoples of the region continue to be an important resource for historians and anthropologists. But beyond these tangible achievements, it's the spirit of Father Kino's work that truly sets him apart. In an era often marked by cruelty and exploitation, Kino consistently chose the path of compassion and respect. He saw the humanity in the people he encountered, recognizing their dignity and potential at a time when many of his contemporaries viewed them as little more than savages to be conquered or souls to be saved. This is not to say that Kino was perfect or that his actions were always beneficial from our modern perspective. Like all historical figures, he was a product of his time, and his mission was ultimately part of a larger process of colonization that had devastating consequences for many indigenous communities. However, within the context of his era, Kino stands out as a voice for justice and human dignity. His tireless efforts to protect the Native Americans from exploitation, his commitment to education and economic development, and his respect for indigenous cultures set him apart from many of his contemporaries. As our story draws to a close, let's return one final time to that May Day in 1700. After successfully intervening to save the life of the condemned Native American, Father Kino doesn't rest on his laurels. Instead, he continues on his planned journey to Dolores, arriving there on May 6th. For Kino, saving a man's life was simply part of the day's work, an extraordinary act that he treated as ordinary. His life reminds us of the power of perseverance in the face of adversity, the importance of bridging cultural divides, and the profound impact that one dedicated individual can have on the lives of many. While we may not agree with all aspects of his mission, we can certainly admire his courage, his compassion, and his unwavering commitment to improving the lives of those he served. Father Eusebio Francisco Kino, priest, explorer, diplomat, and humanitarian. His story is a testament to the complex tapestry of history, where great achievements often come hand in hand with profound challenges. As we look back on his life from our vantage point in the 21st century, we can appreciate the indelible mark he left on the landscape, the people, and the very soul of the American Southwest. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time. Until next time, may we all strive to face our own challenges with the same courage and compassion that Father Kino displayed on that dusty trail so many years ago. Please leave a like or comment. For further desert romps, hit the subscribe button. Happy trails!